بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وبعد. إن الحمد لله نحمده تعالى ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وبعد. I wanted to start by sharing with you the story of a man who lived just one generation after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the man's name was Malik bin Dinar. Malik bin Dinar. Early on in his life, he was not actually a pious man. And he was involved in drinking alcohol and different types of evil. And that was the way that he led his life. Until one day, he came across a young girl who was 2 or 3 years old. So when he saw her, he said to himself, I would really love to have a young girl like this one. I'd really love to have a young girl like this one. So he decided to get married, and he got married, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with a daughter. Now his daughter, she had a strange or an interesting habit. Whenever she would sit in his lap and he would still be drinking alcohol, he would still be drinking khamr, she would push the cup away from him. And this happened more than one time. Until he said to himself, I have to change my life. This is enough. I have to change my life. I have to, better myself, become a better person, become a better father. So he started to gradually change his life. Now before too long, his daughter became sick and she died. So he lost his daughter, who was only about 3 years old at the time, and he was very affected by this. He used to love his daughter, and he was very affected by losing her. When that happened, he actually relapsed. He went back to what he was doing before. He went back to drinking, and he went back to those evil ways, and he did it, and it became worse than it was the first time. Until one night, he said, I went to sleep after drinking that night, and I had a dream. And in my dream, it was the day of judgment. And people were coming out of their graves. And people were being gathered, and I was being gathered to the place of gathering. Until I saw this large, horrible-looking snake was coming at me. And it was coming from far away. At first I couldn't tell, but then I realized that it was actually coming at me. So I started to run. And I ran, but I wasn't going to be able to get away from it. And I came across an old man. Remember, this is in his dream. I came across an old man who was old and weak and couldn't really move. And I told him, old man, help me. Help me. How do I get away from the snake? And the old man said, I can't really help you. But go that way, keep going this way, and you might find somebody that can help you. So he kept on running until he saw a hilltop that had some young children on it. So he went up to the hilltop and he found his daughter there. And his daughter sat him down and she calmed him down, and she sat on his lap like she used to sit in his lap in the dunya. And she said to him, that snake, my father, that snake is your bad deeds, your evil deeds. You made them so heavy that now you're not able to get away from them. There's nothing you can do. And that old man that you passed by was your good deeds. You made them so weak and so light, and you didn't do enough of them that they're not able to help you today. And she read to him the verse from the Quran, أَلَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَمَا نَزَلَ مِنَ الْحَقِّ. She read to him the verse. The verse says, has the time not come for the believers that they humble themselves to the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that they follow the truth that was revealed by Allah? So he started saying, the time has come. Oh Allah, the time has come. It's time right now. And he woke up and he was still saying that. The time has come right now, the time has come right now. So he said, I made wudu and I went to the masjid, and it was almost time for Salatul Fajr. And in the Salah, the Imam read the same verse that my daughter had said to me in my dream. So Malik ibn Dinar, he changed his life from that point. And not only did he change his life, but he became one of the greatest scholars in Islamic history, and he was known for his simplicity, and he was known for his ibadah and his lifestyle, and he became one of the most remembered scholars of the tabi'een that we know. So he changed his life, he learned from that lesson, he benefited, and he went through a trial. And those people, they went through trials just like we go through trials. Sometimes when we face trials in life and we face difficulties, whether it be with ourselves or with our children or whatever the case is, we think that, we live in a time that's different and things are different now. And, stories about the Sahaba and stories about the Salaf are not going to help us. But we see that they faced similar trials. Okay, so we will be tried. And the question is, will the trial bring us closer to Allah, or will it cause us to go away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? One of the ways that we're tried, of course, is with our children. This is a trial. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا أَمْوَالُكُمْ وَأَوْلَادُكُمْ فِتْنَةٌ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ عِنْدَهُ أَجْرٌ عَظِيمٌ. Know that in your children, Allah says, in your children and in your wealth are a trial. And with Allah is a great reward. So there will be trials in our children. Again, do they make us come closer to Allah, or do they try us in a way that pushes us away from our responsibilities towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Now, a lot of times the questions come when we get asked questions, or what we see is that a lot of times the trial or the difficulty comes at the period of time known as adolescence. At that period of time, that age that starts from 11, 12, 13 years old, this is when people start to get a little bit confused. Or they see some change in behavior in the children, and they become confused. And the children themselves are also confused. So the first thing, or one thing that's very important for us to keep in mind, is that during that period of that age of adolescence, a lot of change is going on within the individual, within the human being. They're going through physical changes. The body is maturing. The mind is also developing as well. Even though we don't see it, the mind is also going through a lot of changes during that period of time. They're facing new emotions that they never faced before. So you see mood swings and things, new types of behaviors that we might not have seen before. They're dealing with a new type of social interaction in a social world that's new to them, that they weren't aware of. Before that, maybe they were living still in fantasy land and cartoons or whatever it is, but now the social world becomes real to them. And they start to face peer pressure and a lot of different things in life that they start to face. So the parent becomes confused, we become confused, and the children themselves, the adolescent, is also confused. All of a sudden, they're reacting in ways that they weren't reacting before. The child will say, "You don't understand me," and slam the door, and whatever, and behaviors that you might be familiar with. Now, one of the challenges here is that in Western culture, or Western train of thought, this period of adolescence is considered to be between childhood and adulthood. So a person between the ages of 12, 13, up to 19, 20, whatever it is considered to be not a child and not an adult. Now here we have a little conflict with what we know from Islam. Because Islamically, once a person hits the age of puberty, they're fully responsible in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're responsible for their actions, they're responsible for the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders us with, and they're held responsible in front of Allah. So the danger is that if we continue to treat them like children during that age, if we treat them like children, then they're going to act like children. And they will not see themselves as adults. But if we treat them as adults, and we speak and communicate with them that way, then they'll also start to act like it. Ali radiallahu anhu, he has a statement when he said, play with the children until the age of 7. Until the age of 7, play with them. And from the ages of 7 and 14, teach them and discipline them from the ages of 7 to 14. And from the age of 14 on, then befriend them. So this is actually a very powerful statement that he made. Play with them until the age of 7. From 7 to 14, teach them and discipline them. And from the age of 14 on, befriend them. A very important piece of advice. And it corresponds with the guidance that comes from the Quran and the guidance that comes from Islam. We're all familiar, for example, with the story of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam with his son Ismail. When he saw the dream that he was to slaughter or that he was to sacrifice his son, he went back to his son Ismail, and what did he say? He said, "Inni ara fil manami anni adbahuk, fanzur madha tara." He asked him. He told him, I see in my dream, and the dream of the prophets is of course revelation from Allah. The ru'ya of the Prophet is revelation. So he knew that this was revelation from Allah. And he knew that he was going to fulfill what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered him. But yet, he still goes back to his son and he tells him, فَانظُرْ مَاذَا تَرَى. What do you see? What is your advice? He's asking him for advice. What is your opinion? What is your advice in this situation? He's asking his son. He's treating him like an adult and he's asking him. And this is part of the Tarbiya. Because again, he was going to fulfill the orders of Allah. He's the messenger of Allah and his dream is wahi from Allah. But he goes back and he asks his son, and this is part of the Tarbiya. This is part of the training. So we have to ask them, and we have to make them feel like adults, and we have to communicate, and the most important thing we have to do is listen. One of the most important things that you can do, or that we can do with our children, is listen to them. Allow them even to do most of the talking and just listen. Listen to see how they're thinking. Listen, because when you listen and you understand how they're thinking and you understand their concerns, then you're going to be more equipped to advise them. And you're going to be more equipped to be a role model. That connection, establishing that connection is very, very important. There was a school counselor, not at this school, but another school. A school counselor, he relays an incident that happened to him. He said there was a girl and she started to get into trouble. In the beginning of high school, she started to get into trouble. And she was in trouble in school, and she was in trouble outside of school, and she reached the point where she was about to be expelled from school. So they started sending her to the counselor once a week. So he would have these sessions with her. And he said at first she would wear this very hard shell, a very hard exterior, and she wouldn't open up at all, and she was very tough, and nothing I said could get through to her. So I decided that one day during one session that I was just going to be completely honest with her. And maybe it would make a difference. So he said, I told her, beneath that tough shell, I know that you're scared, and I know that you're hurting. You're scared because you feel like nobody cares about you, and that if you open up, you're only going to get hurt. So you keep this tough shell that you have on. He told her that. The girl wasn't impressed at all, and she left. And then months and months went by until he didn't have any sessions, he wasn't counseling her anymore. But one day she came to his office and she knocked on the door and she wanted to talk, so he invited her in. And she opened up to him that day. And she said, you know, my mother died when I was 8 years old, and my father is very busy. I don't see him. He's a successful businessman. He's very busy and he doesn't care about me at all. He couldn't care less what happens to me. So the counselor decided that he would try to set up a meeting with the father and the daughter and him. So he set up the meeting. He set the time, he called the father. The father was very enthusiastic about attending. So the girl showed up to the meeting about 15 minutes early, and she was very nervous. The counselor says she was very nervous. I never saw her like that before. She had dropped that tough exterior, and she opened herself up, and she was very, very nervous. And this was a few minutes before the start of the meeting. Finally, when the time came, when it was exactly the time for the meeting, the father hadn't shown up yet. So the girl started to say, he's not going to come. I know him. He won't show up. The counselor told her, no. I talked to him personally. He assured me that he's coming. Don't worry. He's on his way. He'll be here shortly. The girl was right. The father didn't show up. And the counselor tried to set up meetings after that. He tried more than once to set up another meeting with the father and the daughter. And again, the father never showed up. So the girl, what she had done was that she had shut everybody else out. She shut everybody else out, and she goes back to this tough exterior because she doesn't want to get hurt. So again, it's very important that we communicate. And maybe sometimes to the fathers more so than the mothers, because the fathers are always busy and they might not always realize the importance of communicating with the children and being there and establishing that relationship. And I've said this before, that boys who grow up without that close relationship with the father, without that role model figure in their life, they grow up and they're much more likely to become, delinquents. And the girls that grow up that way are much more likely to fall into dangerous relationships and what have you, because there's that void that she didn't have, that relationship with the father that wasn't there. So it's very important that we establish that communication, that we connect with them, that we listen to them. And a lot of times, even our behavior, if we look at it, it might be negative. A lot of times we're expecting the worst. We can see it in our statements and the things that we say to our children. We're expecting the worst from them. And that will become a reality. If we believe it, and we expect it, and then they start to believe it as well, the worst will become a reality. So again, it's important to be positive, and it's important that when we advise to start by praising, and not to make a big deal out of small things, but at the same time not to be blind to something that might be a big problem. We have to find the balance, find the middle path, and to be aware. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he was very aware of the youth. Not only his children, but he was very aware of the youth. There was a young boy in the Medina who used to walk around all the time with a small bird. And the small bird would be sitting on his shoulder, and he would be playing with the bird until the bird died. And the boy was real sad. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he saw him one time, and he saw the boy sad, and he told him in a funny way, in a way that rhymes, he told him, Ya Aba Umair, ma fa'ala al-Nughayr. He said, Ya Aba Umair, the boy was known as Abu Umair. He told him, ma fa'ala al-Nughayr. He said, what happened to the bird? But he said it in a funny way that rhymes. And the boy started cracking up, and he started laughing until he forgot about the bird. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he was very aware of the youth. He knew what they were doing. He knew what was going on in their lives, even though they weren't his children, and even though he was, of course, busy. He would travel across the city sometimes. He would walk a long way through Al-Madinah to go to the house of Fatima, his daughter, so that he would visit his grandchildren, Al-Hassan and Al-Hussein. So one day he got there and he said, where's the little guy? And Al-Hassan came running out, and they hugged each other. And then the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he made dua for him. And he said, Oh Allah, I love him, so love him, Oh Allah. And he made this dua for him. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he had that concern, and he went out of his way, and he was very aware of the children. He showed compassion towards them. One time he was kissing some children, and a Bedouin man came, and the Bedouin man said to him, I have 10 children, and you kiss the children and you love them, but I've never once kissed any of my children. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told him, whoever doesn't show mercy towards people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not show him mercy. Will not show him mercy on the Day of Judgment. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he had that compassion. And a lot of times we might have the habit of being very busy, and we're completely occupied, even during free time. Even time that's supposed to be free time, we're still busy. Even if it's our free time, we feel like we have to be, whatever it is, watching something on TV, or following the news, or the internet, or Facebook, or whatever it is. So we have this habit of being totally consumed all the time. And we have to realize that giving the children, giving them that time that we give them, even if we don't feel it, even if we don't sense it at the time, that time that we spend with them provides that foundation for them later on in life. That foundation, that time that we spent with them, sometimes doing simple things, they'll go back to that. We hope that our youth avoid major problems in life, and that when they start thinking rationally, they go back to what they were upon when they were children. And that time that they spent with us, and hopefully we were teaching them the right thing. When the children become disconnected, it's usually because we're disconnected. And I mentioned one time before that some of the major inventors, like Steve Jobs, he invented the iPad and the iPhone, but he didn't allow his own kids to use it, which is very surprising if you think about it. Because it might be one of the first things that we do is we run to get our children a phone, and we make sure that there's enough devices all over the house, but he invented it, but he didn't allow his own children to use it. And they even did surveys amongst the top engineers in the big companies like Oracle and Microsoft and these companies, and they found that these top engineers were not allowing their kids to use the internet and these devices. And they were even disconnecting it from their house. And these are top engineers. These are the people that invented the internet, and they're not allowing their children. So obviously they know something that maybe we don't know. Maybe there's something that we can learn from them. And another thing that happens that's very frequent that we might not think about is that when we don't spend time with our children, we try to replace it with gifts. We try to replace it by giving them things. And that gives them a sense of happiness, and it gives us a sense of happiness. But this is in reality a false sense of happiness. Because what we're creating in them is this feeling or this definition that humans are valued by materials. That a human is valued by materials. So I love my father based upon the gift that he gave me. Or my mother, based upon the size of the gift that she gives me. And the best kids are the ones who have the best toys. So what we're doing when we replace quality time with gifts is that we're creating this materialism within the children. We're creating this materialism where they start to value people based upon things and based upon what a person has. And those same examples of the prophets, of Ibrahim in the Quran, alayhi salam, and Yaqub, when they came towards the end of their lives, when that period of Tarbiya was complete, they came towards the end of their lives. And remember that their children were also prophets. The children of Ibrahim alayhi salam were prophets. And the children of Yaqub were prophets. So when they came towards the end of their lives, one of the last things that they were saying to their children was what? مَا تَعْبُدُونَ مِن بَعْدِ. They were asking their children, what are you going to worship after me? What are you going to worship after me? Did I teach you correctly? What are you going to worship after me? And they would respond, قَالُوا نَعْبُدُ إِلَهَكَ وَإِلَهَ آبَائِكَ وإله آبائك إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق إلها واحدا ونحن له مسلمون. So they responded that we will only worship Allah and that we will not associate any partner with Allah. And notice this comes after the end of that period of tarbiyah. This was their greatest concern. What are you going to worship after me? Has Tawheed been established in the heart? This was their concern. Many times our concern is what? What we're leaving behind. And you ask a person, why do you work so hard? And why do you work 14 and 16 and 18 hours a day? And, I'm just trying to leave something behind for my children so that they don't have to struggle the way I struggled. No, this is not what you need to leave with them. You need to be with them and you need to teach them and leave them with Tawheed. And if you do that, you'll have been successful. This was the example of the prophets. So don't be so concerned about what materials and properties and how much money you're going to leave behind. They'll learn to make it just like you learned to make it. Just like you learn to work and make money, they're going to learn to work and make money as well. But be concerned with the education and the knowledge and the practice that you live with them. And another thing that we might overlook is the importance of making dua for our children. The importance of making dua for them. Make dua for them. We all know that a person's deeds end when he dies except for 3, and one of those is a child, a righteous child that still makes dua for his father or for his mother. And a person will receive this reward in their grave, hasanat, these good deeds will be coming to him or her that he doesn't know where they came from. And it will be said to him, this is your righteous son or daughter making dua for you. So you receive the reward for it. But before they're going to make dua for us well after we're gone, we need to also make dua for them. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he used to do that very often. He would say, for example, Allahumma faqihhu fi ad-din wa 'allimhu at-ta'wil. He would make dua for Ibn Abbas, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him knowledge and to give him understanding. And one of the characteristics that Allah tells us about Ibadur Rahman, when he, in the end of Surah Al-Furqan, when he explains these qualities of these people that he links to himself, he calls Ibadur Rahman. And this is the best of descriptions that Allah can give, that he calls somebody his abd, right? This is what he described the prophets with. He described the Prophet Muhammad by saying, Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi. He called him his abd. And Isa alayhi salam qala inni abdullah. The first thing that came out of his mouth, he said inni abdullah, when he spoke miraculously as a baby. So the best of descriptions that a person can be described with is being an abd of Allah. So Allah gives us the qualities of these people. And one of the qualities that He says is that they say, وَالَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. That they're constantly making dua for their families and for their children. And not only that, but they're asking Allah to make them the leaders of the best of people, the leaders of the muttaqeen, the leaders of the pious people. So their goal is high. They're aiming very high with their dua. They're not settling for the lowest, or hopefully I sneak into Jannah through the window, or no. They're making the highest of dua, and they're setting the bar very high. They're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make their children leaders for the believers, leaders of the muttaqeen. And this is very important in our time again, because what's being destroyed is the family unit. This is what you see being destroyed. It's the family unit that falls apart. So the biggest priority is, will you leave Islam with your children after you? You know, after you're gone, are they still going to have Islam with them? Are they going to have learned from you to practice this deen and to worship Allah and that tawheed really ingrained in their hearts? This is what we have to think about, what we leave behind, inshaAllah. And I'll stop here, inshaAllah, and if there's anything, if anybody has any questions or wants to talk further about anything, we still have a couple of minutes, so I'll be around for a couple of minutes, inshaAllah. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.